Hello and welcome back. In last week's video, I spoke about why your truth matters. In today's video, I'm going to be speaking about ways that truth can elude us through the choices that we unconsciously make by essentially avoiding pain. I'm going to start off with a little piece of writing. I'm not actually sure who wrote it. Beneath all the veils of deception, there is only love. So when spring comes, darkness will turn to light, inner wars to peace, blurred senses to awareness, scarcity to abundance, and self will turn to love. I think it might be Matt Kahn that wrote it. I never put it down. But I'm going to be looking at how pain, especially emotional pain that isn't looked at, can really take our lives into directions that we would not otherwise want for ourselves. And I'm going to be looking at it in 3 stages, or kind of through a sequence of pain, avoidance, and that avoidance as the denial of one's truth. And to do that, I'm going to be telling a little bit of a personal story. The hope is that, I know that everyone's story is different, but I get the feeling that the pain that we face throughout life is, like the trials that we face are somewhat universal, and I'll break this down in a little bit. But the pain that we face is universal, and the way that we tend to respond to pain is also universal. And even though our stories might not be identical, maybe you can look into your own and see if this is a pattern that you've also had somewhere with a particular wound, and if that is stopping you or kind of blinding you in some sense to an aspect of yourself that could lead to your abundance, that could lead to your growth and your healing. So maybe to start off, I'll look at the concept of the inner child. But the inner child is essentially the understanding that within us there lives all of the previous versions of ourselves that experienced things, right, and had their own hopes and dreams and perceptions. The way I imagine it is we're like the roots of, not the roots, the rings of a tree. And as a tree grows, it just expands on those rings. But if you cut the tree in half, you can see those rings, right? Like those concentric rings. And each ring tells a story about where that tree was at that time in terms of what was the season, or what were the conditions, what, how nourished was the tree, and all of those things. And we're a lot like that. Like our old selves don't just disappear as we age. Our soul kind of holds on to those things. Our soul builds up on those things. But the problem is in when certain aspects of those past selves are stuck. That can actually cascade into the present day, into triggers and self-sabotage and feelings of stagnation, into feelings of emptiness and like inconsolable grief. And all those things that we do to abate that and to try to suppress that and distract ourselves from that, that can all be calling to like inner children that are burdened and that are calling out for our nurturance and our support. So here's a bit of a story. I've always been a very sensitive kid. You know, I am a sensitive person, a very sensitive person. And because of that, I've had a pretty, pretty difficult time for many different reasons, but I'm gonna talk about my childhood briefly and how I grew up in a culture and in a family that, bless them, they did not really understand sensitivity, and they didn't have much regard for it in that sense, right? It wasn't seen as a useful aspect, especially for a boy who would grow up to be a man one day. So, yeah, people around me were pretty hard and not very emotional, and they were always kind of pushing through. And I had to learn very quickly to catch up to that if I wanted to survive, if I wanted to make it through, and not get left in the dust or not get, not piss anyone off. And essentially, what happened through the years was I developed this personality or this coping mechanism, you might say, which became a mask, right? And what it looked like was a very in control person, a very hard person. Um, People that know me might say, "What do you mean? You're pretty soft and all that," but I just mean in the sense of not letting a lot of things get to me and always being rather in control and being quite independent and yeah, being quite stoic, I guess you might say, right? And that was the personality that formed in response to a environment that really had no space for sensitivity, no space, no patience, no regard for it. And I kind of took it that in order to survive out in the world, I had to be this person, and my softer side, which I internalized as just being weak and pathetic and irritating and irrelevant, all of those things, my softer side, I just threw down into the shadow, into that basement. And I thought that is for the best. And I went on with life being the achiever and being the independent, go-getter who just pushed through everything. What I didn't realize was that what I pushed down with that sensitivity was so many other aspects of my being, of my truth, connected to that sensitivity. My intelligence, my intuition, my empathy, my creativity, right? My passion and my love, my capacity to love, I suppose. And those things had gone down in the shadows with that sensitivity that I just wanted to get rid of. And that became a problem that presented so many problems throughout my teenage years and my young adult years. I mean, I guess I am still a young adult. Am I 26? I don't know. I think young adult ends at 25, but still feel like one. Um, yeah, so there were so many problems that were rising up that I could not understand, and I was running into so many patterns of self sabotage and running into the same situation over and over that didn't work out for me, where I was exploited, where I was betrayed, whatever, where I was just not in my power, you know, and I was not in contact with myself, and I could not understand why, you know, and there was so much kind of like shame connected to that, because it was like, why can't I just get it right? And what I should do, therefore, is just, you know, get more knowledge and get more control of the situation, and, you know, suppress more of the sensitivity to not show that I'm, you know, and yeah, that didn't work, obviously. And what I started to realize when I kind of went into my dark night of the soul, for those who don't know, the dark night of the soul is essentially a period of time where your soul awakens from a lifetime of living in survival, in habit, in compliance, not really being yourself. There comes a time when the stars align, you might say, or when the situations are just are the most opportune, where your soul is just like, okay, cool, we're gonna we're gonna do something about this. It's time for me to rise back up again, and to for us to reclaim our lives. And it's a period of like great turmoil, turbulence, a lot of things falling away, the old falling away, making space for the greater, truer thing that's emerging from within. James Hollis, who is a Jungian analyst and author, he talks about it being like the summons of the soul. You know, like we all have an appointment with ourselves at some point in our lives. Away from the identity that we've put on, there is a deeper part of us that we are all bound to meet at some point or another. So when this period came for me, I reacted to this expill of emotions because it was a very raw period in my life. Like everything was coming out and I was a complete mess. And the part of me that still believed that the sensitivity and the softness was wrong completely freaked out, because I'm not supposed to be showing this. So I found myself absconding. I just like ran essentially. And much like an animal that goes and digs a burrow somewhere far away, and when it's injured and licks its wounds and either heals there or dies there, that was pretty much the what I did. And even though within this time I was doing a lot of self-discovery for the first time, because I'd been so severed from my true self for such a long time. Even though that was happening, there was still so much avoidance of the pain at the core of it all. Because in my mind, it's like you just don't really go there, you know. And only recently, actually, did I realize that pain is at the door of a deeper truth. Much like I spoke last week about the weeds that kind of grow in your inner garden, and they suffocate and obscure the truth beneath. That's also what the pain was doing. And the more I just became curious about it and was willing to see what's beneath, the more I realized it's that very sensitivity I was running from and rejecting. And the more I also realized that with that were all the aspects of myself that I was longing for, because I was really longing to regain my sanity. I was longing to regain my sense of just being grounded and being able to express myself and live in the way that I knew was possible and that I was capable of, but I couldn't access those things. Only to realize that they were all entangled with my sensitivity, that very thing that I learned to put away. And this obviously then necessitated the only way out of my dilemma was through, right? And it caused me to just like sit down and really reflect on how it is I'm going to make a life out of my sensitivity, and to kind of turn that whole thing around, that to be sensitive means you can't do something, and to turn that around and say I can do it sensitively, I can do it in my way, and to start to bring into the light all of those things that I had exiled into the shadow, and to start to look at what does my sensitivity require of me, because up until now I had been living a life kind of like in the pace and rhythms of the world, right? The world's expectations, living fast, living on a very tight and rigid schedule. And I realized, no, my sensitivity requires a slower pace. My sensitivity requires some silence here and there. My sensitivity requires simplicity. It requires kindness, it requires just soft environments that nurture it and allow it to just breathe, so that all of those other aspects that I mentioned can arise and grow as well. So I had to essentially go into the pain, stop avoiding the pain that I thought the sensitivity was causing, go right into it and realize that no, the sensitivity is actually holding the treasure. It is the well of the gold, In Jungian psychology, they talk about the golden shadow, and we all have a shadow, right? Parts of us that we have exiled into the shadow, exiled into the unconsciousness. We keep that in the dark. But what the golden shadow is when you delve into your shadow and you reach for those things and you nurture those things, you actually realize how much value they have to offer. They have the potential to lift you up and to bless you abundantly if given the chance. And my sensitivity was definitely a golden shadow And this is just part and parcel of the work of reclaiming oneself, right? Because to reject my sensitivity was living under a narrative that was given to me by society, that a male could not be legitimate, especially a black man, can't be fully legitimate in his sensitivity and being in touch with his emotions and his inner world, and moving from that place. It was like, no. Like, so the work of reclamation for me was to redefine that and to be like, no, that's what y'all say, but I'm still gonna be me because I need to be me because I'm here to be me. And so with that, I just wanna kind of put the question out there of what what emotional pain do you find yourself avoiding? What triggers and situations do you find yourself repeating? Where do you find yourself stuck in life? Where are the places inside yourself that you refuse to go? Because those might be the very places that have that golden shadow, right? That are waiting to actually bless you and to free you when you give them an opportunity and some curiosity and some compassion and nurturance. And yeah, I guess also with that, I'll just want to have a little bit of a confession that this wasn't a very easy video to make. I realized as well that there was so much secrecy behind the shame of the pain, and I think that's rather common. I think that with those, we each kind of carry our own shadow, and that shadow is usually shrouded in a lot of shame. And so you'll seldom hear anyone really talking about that thing in the middle that really hurts, and that is a constant kind of bother in their lives. And just to begin that conversation with yourself is a really powerful thing, because I think at the end of the day, the only person that needs your acceptance and your validation and your love is yourself. Your inner child needs you more than anything and anyone else. And once you take that responsibility upon yourself as the mature one, as a mature version who has the resources, who has the capacity, your life can radically improve and you can find yourself freed up. I spoke, of course, about how the truth sets you free. The truth sets you free, and the inner child has a portion of that truth in the things that you won't feel. The things that you refuse to feel and look at are things that you will not see about yourself, about your own soul. To a degree, we remain blind to those parts of ourselves, and we lack the proper information then about ourselves to make informed decisions, right? I mean, all choices come from the information that we have available to us. And if you're lacking certain information, then there are certain choices you just won't even think to make for yourself. So this stuff goes so deep, and I think it's also that thing of there's certain things you can't know until you know, and the only way to know is to go straight through that place that you don't want to go inside. And I think maybe also just a word of assurance that your feelings, they can do many things to you, but they cannot actually hurt you. Your feelings can't kill you, is what I'm trying to say. They can be overwhelming and they can be difficult, but they cannot kill you. And at the end of the day, they are just trying to reveal the truth to you. Our feelings, as James Hollis says, are an autonomous function. They happen completely by themselves. We don't have a choice whether or not feelings arise. What we do have a choice about is how we respond to them. And that can be the difference between a life of alignment and freedom and purpose and one of stagnation and suppression and suffering, you know. So yeah. I think that that gets to the crux of what I wanted to cover in this video: pain, avoidance, and how that leads to the, well, here's another way to put it: the avoidance of pain being the denial of truth, and how we don't always consciously make that connection, and we can suffer needlessly because of it. So I hope that this video gives you that encouragement, to just start looking at that place within, and to realize that at the end, beneath all the veils of deception, there's only love. You know, at the end, like at the bottom of that well is gold, if you just stick with it, and if you believe in it, you know, because at the end of the day, it is your inner child that is there holding on to the burden, and that is the cause of all the dysfunction, that is the cause of all the depression, is this inner child that's overwhelmed, kind of trying to keep the door shut on all of these things. And you, as the adult version of yourself, can just walk up and go and open that door and realize, oh, there aren't any monsters in this closet. It's just something that we were like overwhelmed with when we didn't have the capacity and the resources and the help that we needed, you know. But now here we are, and we can do it, and it's not bigger than us, and it's easier than you actually think sometimes, you know, because you're bigger than it. You're bigger than it. And if it's coming up to go. You know, it wants to move through you. It doesn't want to torment you. Your soul wants to be free. So let the truth be. Let the truth be. All right. I think I'm going to leave this one here today. See you in the next one.